Now it is time for our first panel discussion. And we'll have a panel of experts who you will be able to ask your questions to on the topic of regulating DeFi. There's many complexities, so without further ado, let us get into it. I'm eager to get to know more about the topic, and I will be inviting first on stage the moderator, whose name is Vlad Dramaliev. He is the founder of the Bithope Foundation, owner of bithope.org, the platform for cryptocurrency donations. He is also the co-founder of Sofia Crypto Meetup, co-founder and member of the managing board of the Bulgarian Bitcoin Association, and an early adopter of the technology. He is also a well-known speaker in the sphere of Bitcoin, DeFi, Web3, and blockchain. So, the floor is yours, Vlad. Welcome, and let's greet him.
Hello, everyone. What an introduction. Thank you so much for that. I couldn't have said it better myself. Actually, the only thing missing is that I'm also the co-founder of a consultancy and education startup focusing on tax and regulation and also compliance in the crypto asset space called at O2K. You can visit the website at o2k.tech. But I guess this is enough for me. As you well know, today we'll be talking about a very, very hot topic. Actually, even from the previous presentation, you noticed that there were a number of regulatory AML implications of NFTs, and this is the same is happening in the DeFi space. So what are we going to discuss today is exactly that, like what's happening on the European level, which are the main legislative acts that have an effect on entrepreneurs, on founders of DeFi projects on the EU level. And yeah, what's coming? What are these compliance regulations, and what is the best way to actually become compliant potentially? And in order to do that, I have two of the, I guess, the best speakers that we have today, my co-panelists today. And the first one is actually Viara Savva. And let me do a little introduction to her using my iPad here so that I don't miss anything. So, Vyara, yeah, welcome to the stage. And let me introduce you. Guys, yeah, welcome, Vyara. So, Vyara is part of a very interesting organization that actually launched recently, and it's called the European Crypto Initiative, European Union Crypto Initiative. And I myself am frequently going online and watching their online webinars, which are monthly, I believe. And they give very, very concise, very up-to-the-point information about regulatory developments. But Vyara is actually a public policy expert at the European Union Crypto Initiative. And this initiative is actually a non-profit that aims to shape EU regulation in favor of open, permissionless, decentralized applications based on blockchain technology. So in other words, yeah, DeFi is covered, definitely. It's interesting that the EU CI recently received support from the Ethereum Foundation, from the Interchain Foundation, if you know the Cosmos blockchain or ecosystem, and also MakerDAO. And MakerDAO is, they are behind, or the project that is behind the DAI stablecoin, one of the most favorite, one of the most popular ones in DeFi. And also, Vyara is a human rights and Web3 lawyer and legal communications expert. So, thank you for being here on this panel. Cool, so this is our first panelist. The second one is, has also a very impressive experience, and I welcome to the stage Robert Kopitsch. Hi, Robert, guys.
Thank you.
So Robert is a Secretary General to the Blockchain for Europe organization, another organization that is has similar goals as the EU CI. It's an organization that represents the international blockchain industry players like Binance, Crypto.com, Aave, and Ava Labs, and among others, of course, at the European level. And he's also a senior policy advisor at the DeFi Education Fund, which is based in Washington, and whose mission is to educate policymakers about the benefits of blockchain-based technology. So apart from that, yeah, you can even now imagine that these two roles make Robert one of the most knowledgeable persons in Europe about what's happening on the policy stage in relation to regulations and various other well, legislative acts that affect crypto assets. So it's a real pleasure to have you both here. As I mentioned in the beginning, 2020, I would say, is one of the years that we have regulation as a buzzword going around crypto Twitter, the online space. Basically, everyone is talking about regulation on the background of, I guess, a bear market that we are going through. But bear market not only in the crypto space, but also in the traditional financial sphere, most definitely. What we had is Indian authorities at the, I guess, the earlier in the year, imposing a very robust, kind of extreme taxation regime on their subjects, with, I believe, some yeah, capital gains tax of more than, I believe, what is it, like 50%, 30%, 30%. Yeah, thank you. And also we had the chairman of the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, Gary Gensler, announcing that basically all tokens, potentially apart from Bitcoin, are securities. In June, we had the in Europe specifically, we had the markets in crypto assets regulation going through the approval, actually finalizing the approval process. And yeah, MiCA, how it's called, or MiCA regulation, is one of those acts that will shape the image of the crypto industry in Europe, I believe at the end of 2023 or beginning of 2024, when it goes into force. And apart from that, we have a number of other legislative proposals. Some of them are being drafted, others are, yeah, will be drafted in the future that affect the DeFi industry. And finally, something from the last weeks, maybe you have heard about this incident, I would call it, or unprecedented happening. There was a developer behind the Tornado Cash crypto mixer that got arrested in the Netherlands. And yeah, that basically kind of fired up a lot of conversations online in crypto Twitter about whether this should happen, because, you know, open source code is a form of free speech. The details are still being clarified from the authorities, but it's true that that developer remains in custody as we speak. So if we look at what has happened in the last couple of weeks, we can see that a lot has been happening on the regulatory front, even before actually the Terra collapse, which for me kind of started the bear market, to be honest. From there on, it was kind of downhill. But regulators were interested in crypto assets before that, after that, and I believe they will be very interested in crypto assets in the coming years. And so I guess now is a good time to stop talking and give the word to the panelists to ask them what they think about yeah, the current state of affairs in Europe. So what are we witnessing, guys? Is this some event that we can describe as a death by regulation, or is this how the crypto industry goes mainstream through regulations? And I will give the word first to Vyara to answer that.
Thank you, and thank you for the introduction, and for also the introduction to the topic. And well, I think the worrisome thing is that, yes, we might witness the death of some crypto projects, and those projects might actually be the most innovative on the space. The most innovative ones that have been more forward-thinking and would, at the end, make it more difficult to be compliant and might end up being attacked. As we saw, as you mentioned, with the Tornado Cash sanctions that started from the OFAC, and that had its really kind of effect on international players and also on, as you mentioned, as something that was protected under free speech, that is computer code, that is a smart contract that you can't really control. And the next thing you know, you might be liable for what this code is doing, even though you have no control over it and you cannot change it. So the industry as a whole is, although we were kind of expecting something similar to happen, probably with the TFR especially, that was adopted like at the political level in June, it was something that the industry is still kind of, it's hard and by industry I also mean us as lawyers and us as communicators of the needs of both sides, like the regulation side and the more protocol level side. We were not prepared for that, and to be honest, it's gonna be harsh what is coming, but I'm honestly hopeful that, for example, by regulations such as MiCA, we at least will have the clarity of what the rules are in at least this segment of the whole space that are crypto asset service providers and token issuers. So it's dead, but also rebirth for some projects.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Robert, your take on that?
First of all, thank you. I agree to a large extent. I think we're at a crossroads in the industry from a regulatory perspective. First, we have a number of regulations that are currently being concluded or in works that will affect what's going on in our ecosystem. First one is the markets and crypto assets regulation, which will cover everything from CASP services like custody, for example, stable coins in all variations, to a certain extent DeFi-like projects, NFTs, utility tokens, and so on. And then you have the whole AML package, which covers all the AML issues. Some were mentioned in the panel or in the presentation before, KYC, and so on. And then you have the ones that look at smart contracts, data on blockchain, the energy usage. Pretty much that's all in the making right now. Some of them are at a very advanced stage. So MiCA, for example, will be concluded by the end of this month, and then we will probably have a text that is useful to the industry. I'm very optimistic that it will solve a lot of problems. It doesn't solve all of them. It's very technical, very complex. It's a very long file, and with all the work that will be done, it will get even more complicated. So the biggest risk the industry probably has is that there will be a need for a lot of lawyers. That's unfortunately traditionally something that happens when the EU regulates, which is good for lawyers, and not so good for smaller and medium-sized companies, but they have legal certainty. So that's the balance they try to strike. On the other side, you have issues like DeFi in particular, for example, where there's a lot of uncertainty about what to do. And we as an industry representation, for example, we try to win time or gain time to use it to educate about it, because you cannot use old rules on new applications, new technologies, and you basically have to re-educate regulators on what to do, how they should do it, and how much time it will take. I mean, sometimes, and we've seen this with the AML implementation, where they said like, hey, let's do this in 6 months. And the industry was like, no way we're going to pull this off in 6 months. And it's like, why? It's like, yeah, because there's not even enough human resources, like compliance officers in this case, to implement it. And I was like, really? It's like, yeah, but then how do the others do? It's like there's a competition on the market, and the biggest will get the most, and the smaller ones, and the small ones will basically be left with nobody to help them. And that's a big problem. So they extended the time and the implementation, for example, simply because they needed to, because otherwise it would have been unrealistic. And the same is true with DeFi. You know, as was mentioned before, it's a reinvention of existing services like lending or exchange or trading and so on. And it's done differently. There is no central entities. It's smart contract based, and these things need a different type of regulators, because before you had basically economists and lawyers, and now you need guys that can read code. Otherwise, you cannot even evaluate what's important. And that's something that we're working on to help them understand that, because it's first they have to understand it and then change it. Then you have to get resources for the education. So it's something that you cannot just pull off like this. I mean, in theory you could, but it's a process. And once this is done, we can actually look into it. And that's why we need time for it. And I think it's very important that the industry contributes. And because it's such a decentralized ecosystem and all the applications, you need more encouragement to those parties and people and companies, developers, to participate, because if they don't do it, and we do it on behalf of the industry, then nobody else will do, because no bank will go out there and say like, hey, let's get DeFi done, let's kill our own business. It's like, that's not what's going to happen. So it's on the industry to do something about it. That's why initiatives like yours or ours, I think, are very important, because there's nobody else that will do it. And it's up to the industry to participate.
You're raising some excellent points there. So on the first side, you mentioned lawyers. So DeFi projects in Europe might have to, as we say it, lawyer up. And that means costs, which is not ideal, because so far, I mean, you don't need to have a legal team in order to build an open source decentralized application. But from now on, it might be different. Actually, Antonia, my co-founder, and I also kind of reached this conclusion that there will be a lot of need for people who understand both angles of the technology, how it works, and why is it different, and why you cannot really regulate it in the same way. And then also on the other side, which is her specialty, taxation and regulation and lawyery stuff, so to say. Our goal is to educate these public officials, potentially tax lawyers, to understand the technology better, because I think if they understand it better, they might reach some better like decisions in the end and draft the legislation in a more realistic, I would say, way. But yeah, so when we talk about costs, because DeFi founders are interested in that, what would be, like, can we do some kind of an assumption about like how much more expensive will it be to launch a project in Europe? Having in mind the licensing regime, the lawyers, like basically what will a startup, like DeFi startup in the EU have to do in order to launch their projects? And let's assume that they are creating a token. That there is some kind of a tokenomics model, and there is a token in their project. Like, what will they have to do according to Mika, let's say?
I mean, if I may, there's two ways to achieve or to approach that, right? So Mika basically exempts true DeFi projects. So if you're fully decentralized, you're not captured by current regulation. That means that you basically have a free space to operate. The problem now is, just because you call yourself DeFi doesn't mean you are DeFi, right? So and on top of that, nobody knows where to start and end what DeFi is. So that leaves it in a positive way open to regulators to evaluate it on a case-by-case basis. So you can go talk to the supervisor or the regulator and explain what you do, and they say like, fine. Or you just do the opposite and just issue your project anonymously, and then basically point the middle finger to everybody. It's like, do whatever you want, you won't catch me. The question is this the right approach? I'm not sure, because in the end you probably will want to scale and operate and don't want to hide up somewhere. So probably there needs to be a solution to those things. And that's a process that will take some time. So the industry has to be patient, but on the other side, vigilant about, as I said before, to make sure that there's no drivers from the outside that have different interests, and that might be coming from the EML world, from the banking world. Sometimes it's political, right? There's just, I mean, Terra, you mentioned it before, was a huge driver to basically be harsh to algorithmic stablecoins, because they used it as an example to say like, this doesn't work, we don't want that, and now they increased the harshness of the regulation for stablecoins, simply because that was a political driver. But on the other side, thanks to the several market crashes in the industry, you could also prove that DeFi works, right? Because all the project that basically collapsed were centralized projects, and DeFi held steadfast and was basically the flagship of the industry. And the more you read about it, the more positive the agenda also gets, at least on at the EU level, and where it's about technicalities. The more political gets, you know, then there's national interest, for example. I mean, if you're, for example, France, just as an example, it's the biggest banking industry in Europe. They have vested interest because they have to defend their own industry, right? They're big funders of political campaigns. They're holding the economy basically in their hands, and they obviously need to balance those interests. So you will see a lot of back and forth in the next months and years. And to answer the actual question about the costs, I think it will all depend on the scalability and how decentral you actually are, right? If you're really decentralized, then it will be much less, for example, than you moving into it by developing into something really decentral, which is mostly the case. Or if you're not actually decentralized, just use it as a PR stunt to attract certain investor groups.
Yeah, Vyara?
Yeah, thank you. I agree with a lot of what you said. And just to add, basically what our main concern is also with the UCI is that the way that the current licensing regime is being drafted and proposed, it would make it far easier for like bigger companies that have already operated on the market to just, even if there aren't crypto companies, to just jump on the crypto wagon, because apart from the CASP, which is crypto asset service providers licensing regime, MiCA also in the last version, we'll see what the final will be, but I don't assume it's going to be much different from that. But MiCA also envisions an opportunity of other license holders that are traditional finance license holders under MiFID, e-money licenses, to also operate as crypto asset service providers, which means that especially with companies that already have those licenses, it will be particularly easier to enter into this market. So it's an enormous concern for smaller companies, for companies in the building protocols, like people building protocols, not companies, in the DeFi space, that would simply probably not be, not have the same starting point as bigger companies. So that's something we need to, and just an example from actually one of our supporters, Monerium, an issuer of e-money stablecoin pegged to the euro. Basically, what they shared with us was that, yes, we consider MiCA isn't perfect, but we consider it net positive, because at the end of the day, we now have clarity that, yes, for what we do, we need an e-money license. And we have assumed that before, and we have gotten one. So in a sense, there are ways to kind of act faster than the events. Exactly. So I would kind of advise, not a legal advice, but I would kind of nurture this curiosity into projects to just kind of start thinking about what would affect them, what is already out there as regulation, and simply kind of be prepared that whatever they're doing, even if it's not regulated, it might and probably will get regulated.
So it's basically a good idea to go and get an opinion from someone who understands the industry and the regulations that are coming up before they enter into force, and be actually ready to be compliant once regulations go into force. And Robert, you mentioned an interesting point, which I entirely agree with. I think due to regulations, some companies might actually become decentralized, because now it's more of a, basically a marketing stunt. On the other side, I believe there will be companies that will not want to become regulated, like DeFi companies, and they will go into what I call dark-fi, the dark-fi part of the crypto space. But unfortunately, the assets that are being managed by those projects in their smart contract might have a hard time entering centralized exchanges and actually reaching the real world afterwards. So I think it will be a choice that each project will make for themselves. Do they want to stay in the light, or do they want to go dark and continue doing what they're doing. I think both approaches are okay. It depends on, I guess, the philosophy of the projects. Okay, so apart from MiCA, are there any regulations that will affect the DeFi space that are upcoming and are not being discussed so widely as MiCA? Because like, if you go to Twitter, it's just MiCA, sometimes the TFR, but I believe there are also a few others that are important. Do you know some of those? And maybe we can start with Vyara this time.
Yes, so something that we are also following closely is the Data Act, because there was recently a proposal, a couple of months ago, which is ages in crypto time, I guess. There was a proposal that was focused more on smart contracts and basically on suggesting that there would be a kill switch for smart contracts, which raised the question of basically we have to rewrite the whole concept of an oracle and how oracles work and how just basically code works. And so there are some worrisome kind of trends that are appearing in other regulations all around Europe, and not just Europe. And something else is also, of course, taxation is a big issue. We expect decade to be more become clearer in November with the proposal for it coming out. And but I wouldn't just think about just the regulations that mention crypto assets by name, because it's also in other regulations and other kind of aspects of life, because especially depending on the project, it might have very different legal needs as well as just operational needs. And so, but those are the two that are already in the works and are pretty critical. And also the overall AML package, because the TFR just want fourth out of it. So you've probably heard about the concept of the new AMLA, the authority that will oversee AML activity on an EU level. So there is a lot going on. There's already talks about MiCA 2, mentioned by the guide, so also regulation probably in the works around DeFi, because there are already kind of working groups working on that. On lending could probably be coming in the next year. So yeah, a lot of things cooking and preparing to be.
Robert, do you want to add something?
I mean, maybe just to clarify, because for me, it's when I'm speaking with US regulators or US people that don't know and I don't know all the acronyms, so TFR, maybe just to explain, is the transfer of funds regulation. It means like when you send money from your CASP to another CASP, or to another wallet, or from a wallet to another wallet. And that's something that's obviously very relevant for DeFi. And I agree with the Data Act, which is, the kill switch in the smart contracts, something very worrying. But it's basically the classical philosophical debate that you have currently on a political level between full control and let the consumers decide. And you see this in pretty much every regulation. I mean, there was the idea to ban Bitcoin, for example, because it uses too much energy without even understanding how it uses this energy, how it receives the energy, and so on. And same is not true with the debates about DeFi, but also NFTs. There will be a report at the EU level at the beginning of the year about NFTs, what to do with them, because currently they're considered some type of financial instrument, which is a bit far-fetched, because most of them are probably not. It's more a commercial tool or asset, similar to a car or a house or something like that, and I think nobody would consider that a financial asset. And then obviously the debate on DeFi itself. There's a working group in the European Commission that looks into embedded supervision, which is probably one of the solutions that we will see are getting pushed in the future, where the regulator is basically part of the actual project, which might make sense because they can overlook the whole thing without having to change anything. And then you might see any regulation coming out of this developments. There's there's two sides to this discussion. The technical level sees that as much too early. I mean, it's basically like trying to regulate a toddler. And the other side is the political one that just sees headlines in the FTs of this world and see like again like the terror crash is like, oh my god, we have to do something because otherwise we look like we hadn't done anything. And sometimes it doesn't matter if it makes sense or not, it's just about doing things.
Yeah.
That's something, unfortunately, that's part of how politics work, because nobody wants to be the one that is blamed for not have done anything.
Yeah.
And if there's any major market development that might force politicians to do something, then might see this earlier than later. But on the other side, I think when it's up to the technical level, we will have some time to talk about it, consulting the industry, and then come up with solutions that hopefully make sense. And in the end, DeFi is global. You have to discuss it on a global level. And that's something you will see more and more, because it won't matter anymore if the person's developing it sitting in Bulgaria, Austria, Romania, Belgium, wherever. It matters who is using it, and therefore you will look more into the investor protection, consumer protection, and these kind of things, and they have to be handled differently than they are now, because there's no central entity, right? It's not somewhere where you can go and say like, hey guys, do something. It's community driven, and therefore there have to be broader discussions about it. So it will take longer probably than some people think, and but on the other side, that's an opportunity to engage.
Yeah. Cool. So before going into the question part, how many minutes do we have actually in this panel? Can someone tell me? 2 more minutes. Okay, so I just wanted to talk about stablecoins a little bit more, but I guess it would be better to have a Q&A session, because I'm sure you might have some questions. So let's go into that. And then if there's time, maybe we can comment on stablecoins a little bit. So, yeah.
Hi, everyone. My name is Syed, and I work in Dubai for Emirates Legal, and I work with the regulators in Dubai. And now, whatever you're talking about today is being developed in Dubai at the speed of light. I don't have the time to breathe in Dubai, because we are working every single day with all companies from all over Europe, landing there in Dubai. 3 things to take note of. Dubai is the first city that set up a virtual asset regulatory authority. First city that came up with a definition for digital assets. Now, look what they did 3 days ago. They got one of the biggest crypto exchanges to set up that exchange in Dubai, and said top 5 minds of the world, who are the regulators, will work around this crypto exchange and then develop the regulations. What a novel way to develop the regulations in a market. Look at the NFT e-marketplace license freely available in Dubai. Look at the trading in digital crypto assets. This is a proprietary license available in Dubai. Look at the metaverse license available in Dubai. Look at the blockchain service provider license available in Dubai. Crypto mining license available in Dubai. And you know what? 60 days ago this happened. And next 10 days, what's going to happen? Whole Dubai government will be inside the metaverse. Now, somebody is pressurizing us and saying, you should impose corporate tax. Some people sitting outside are pressurizing us, impose taxes. What Dubai government is going to do is as follows. They said, all the new companies that you're setting up, set up inside the metaverse. Any company which is inside the metaverse will not be taxed. You can carry out freely all the commercial transactions. So, place 2, I don't want to take further time, but the important part is, when we are working with regulations, what we need to see is how we can reach out to the investors, to people, and to those who are involved in this process. There is no need for lawyers in this whole process. I'm a lawyer myself. You have to create regulations where those who are interested in this technology, in this process, can avail the benefits themselves with minimal use for lawyers. Thank you.
Yeah, that was a great comment, actually. And this is the way that I believe countries should think about the DeFi space, like how to attract the talent, how to enable the talent to actually change the world in a way, and not kill that talent or the aspirations of that talent with red tape and regulations. So Dubai, I know, is growing in significance, as a crypto hub. So yeah, thanks for that update. One more question there from Antonio.
It's actually an addition about OECD Carve. OECD Carve, unfortunately, is also coming, and it's kind of a mix between DA8 and MiCA. So unfortunately, there's one more thing to look about.
And what does CARF stand for?
Crypto asset framework.
Is it related to taxation?
Taxation, yes, and also reporting like you have in MiCA.
Yeah, so lots of acts are coming that will affect the crypto space, definitely. And some of those are not that visible, like the CARF, which I didn't know about until recently. I think Antonio told me about it. One more question up there. Which is a comment, actually, maybe a comment. No questions.
Hi, I have two questions. The first one is, do you think in the future we are going to see on-chain regulations on decentralized networks like Ethereum, for example? And the second question is for Mr. Kopitsch. Do you have an opinion on the recent allegations and leaks of AVO apps?
Nice, great questions. The first one is very interesting because it's related to the idea of self-regulation of the industry, which actually didn't happen, I guess, or not in the scale that it should be happening. But yes, please, anyone who wants to answer. I guess the second question is for you specifically, but Vyara, if you want to take the first one.
Well, yeah. So I would, as Vladi mentioned, I think we kind of missed the opening where the industry, the DeFi kind of space, could have proven itself kind of ready and able to 100% self-regulate. So in a sense, it's not just, of course, because there's this enormous mix-up between CeFi and DeFi. So that's one thing, but also there have been accidents in the DeFi space as well. It hasn't fulfilled the promise that it had initially. So I don't think that we'll ever see a 100% self-governed project, especially in the future.
Yeah, that's a good point again. That some of the projects that actually lost the biggest amounts of action, or even become central to the market slumps, were CeFi projects that lacked transparency, while DeFi projects are generally much more transparent. You know their liquidity, you know the funds, the assets under management, you can see them on the blockchain. So they're much easier to, like that, more transparent, easier to audit, while these CeFi, hybrid entities are very hard to follow. But Robert, yeah, maybe if you have a comment on the first question, then also.
I mean, no, I think that was spot on. On the second question, that's very straightforward. I'm not a representative of Ava Labs or a member of staff or anything, so I cannot comment on that, and I will not. And it's not because it's Ava Labs, it's simply because I'm not part of the company, so I don't have the insights, I don't know the details. To be honest, I haven't read much more about it than the top line news, and I think I'm the wrong person to ask that, and I cannot comment on it even if I could. I simply don't know enough.
Yes, so also it might be the case, which is very frequently the case in the DeFi space, that this is someone trying to short the token and putting up some information that is actually not true. But yeah, we don't know the facts. Let's see. Let's see what time will show us. And I guess if there are no more questions, we can close the panel. I hope that was interesting. You can approach us at any time during the conference and ask questions. We'll be happy to reply. Thank you very much to the excellent panelists today for your insights. These guys are actually the people who are fighting for the crypto industry on the European level. So buy them a drink tonight or get them a coffee. Make them feel special, because they really are special. So a big round of applause for them. And yeah, finally, thanks to the organizers for organizing this panel, this whole conference. Thank you guys for inviting us. I hope this will be a tradition in the future. Thank you. See you around, guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you.